now it is time to get to the nitty-gritty. In this video, we're going to talk about the very first farm bill. So we recognize this as the first actual farm bill, and that was called the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933. That sounds like a test question. What was the first farm bill? The AAA, the AAA of 1933, the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933. This 1933 law focused on 6 basic storable commodities. Once again, if you have the textbook that I'm using as a reference, you can look up those 6 commodities. The important thing to note is that these are storable commodities, meaning things that can be put into long-term storage, which means not a lot of livestock options. Milk, for example, was on the list because you can convert milk into butter and cheese and non-fat powdered milk or non-fat dry milk and those kind of things, and you can store them for very long times. And so these basic storable commodities primarily focus on crops that farmers would grow as opposed to livestock. I don't think there's any beef in here. I think pork might have been one of the commodities. That's because pork can be salted and stored long term. That's why we produce bacon and ham in the first place. It's been salted for storage purposes. And then it established this thing that is still around. It still exists. It's called the Commodity Credit Corporation, the CCC, the Commodity Credit Corporation. And the job of the Commodity Credit Corporation was to provide credit or loans to farmers. This is our non-recourse marketing loan. Now, here's an important little bit of trivia that you might want to know. This first farm bill was actually declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. It was funded by a tax that the Supreme Court said was not constitutional. So this first farm bill was actually challenged in a court of law. So the way this works, if the president signs a new law, signs a bill into a law, and that law starts to do its thing as the various federal agencies start to go out and execute on that law and make that law happen, people look at it and sometimes they get unhappy about it and they'll end up in a courtroom, and eventually you get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's job is and has always been to serve as a check on the legislative and executive branch, to make sure they don't create laws that violate our Constitution. And an important thing to know about this first farm bill, over time, the list of commodities that were added to those 6 basic storable commodities just kept on growing, right? It kept growing. Now, another important thing that was in this first farm bill that's stayed in farm bills for a very long time is this notion that if you want to get some type of subsidy from the federal government, if you want to participate in that non-recourse marketing loan concept, they required you to reduce production. And that took several different forms. Sometimes it was flat out, we're going to pay you to reduce production. Now, the details of it aren't so much important for our purposes right now. And this is where we get the idea of our first production quotas popping up, or allotments, right? Allotments. So a county was given an amount of grain it could produce or amount of cropland it could use, and each county had a board that was basically the precursor to today's Farm Service Agency, and that board then took what the county's allotment was and divided it up amongst the farmers in that county. Now, the Farm Service Agency, also known as the FSA, that's the abbreviation, the Farm Service Agency, it's the, it is the thing that grew out of that county level grain board or commodity board. I forget what they called it. If you want to get money from the federal government and you're running a farm, you need to get your rear end down to the Farm Service Agency in your county because they're the ones that dish out that money. So the Farm Service Agency is the boots on the ground branch of the USDA that administers these programs. And so if you want some kind of subsidy from the federal government, you head down to the Farm Service Agency and you sign up for it. Now, throughout the 1930s, we have several other things going on, and the main thing we have to worry about is this concept of surplus commodities. The notion here is basically that we've produced too much and therefore prices are too low, and the solution to that is to subsidize prices, thereby incentivizing farmers to produce more. And we've seen this on our supply and demand diagrams. You can rewind to the previous videos and roll back and see those. So we've got these policies that are creating too much production, And we had the policies because prices are low and the extra production drives prices down. So we've got this scenario where we actually have to do something about that. And one of the things we did was a thing called the ever normal granary. And what was its job? Its job was literally to buy up commodities with the hopes of holding on to the commodities for a day when the price might drop, and then they would sell it. So basically the federal government would buy grain, put them in the ever normal granary. Other things popped up as well. There was a Federal Surplus Commodity Corporation. The Federal Surplus Commodity Corporation is tied to that school lunch program. The basic idea here is that the Secretary of Agriculture was authorized, right? So Congress authorized the administration to do something. The Secretary of Ag was authorized to go and buy up agricultural commodities and then turn around and give the food away. And that's where the school lunch program came from. So school lunch programs are USDA policies that are in the Farm Bill, and they popped up way back in the 1930s. So one of our policy solutions in the 30s was literally to buy up commodities and turn around and give them away for free, which sounds suspiciously like what the Romans did. If you remember our discussion about the Roman bread policy, we're going to buy up the wheat, or buy up bread and hand it back to people subsidized or very cheap, which is one of the reasons why we talk about that Roman policy in the class. If you want to rewind and watch the video, you can do that. In fact, I'll put that video up right here so that you can see it. And of course, the last important thing to note about the 1930s is that food stamps were created in 1939. And again, it was created to deal with surplus commodities. In other words, it was created in an attempt to spur demand so agricultural prices would go up. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the video right here, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.